Welcome to episode 12 of Sullivan Street, where we have a very special guest. But first, I'll say hi and good afternoon to Chris. I want to say how are you, but I already know you're in a good mood because of our
Yeah,
special guest.
am I not? You're saying I'm not special anymore, Eric? Is that what you're
That's right.
trying to tell me?
A little bit, a little bit.
I am here every time, and this person hasn't been here before, and is a sort of an important person in the thing that we have a podcast about.
In
So,
the Counting Crows lore. So yeah, let's not waste any time. So our guest today is Matt Malley, as you know, probably from the podcast description, a founding band member of Counting Crows, one of the five, I believe, founding band members.
Mm.
So officially in the band, I think, from 91 to '05, so about 15 or 16 years, and a member of the band during their four first studio albums. So without any further, thank you so much for joining on the podcast. Good afternoon, Matt Malley.
Hey guys, good to be here.
So I know we have all sorts of questions for you. Again, thank you for joining us. I don't know, Chris, did you have any kind of introduction questions or something you wanted to start off the bat with?
well, I figured we'd kind of start at the beginning, sort of how you sort of came to sort of be asked to be in the band. I was actually kind of curious. I know you're part of the early part, but like, who was in the band already when you were asked to be a part of it? So who's, because obviously there's Adam and there's Dave Bryson to beginning, but
hmm
what's the sort of like entry point there?
Yes, good question. Adam and Dave were a duo. They were an acoustic duo first, and I was in a band with Dave Bryson about 2 years before that, called Mr. Dog, and it was a great band. It was one of my favorite bands of my life, along with Counting Crows, and we fashioned ourselves after Roxy music. And anyway,
Hmm.
Dave and I ran into each other literally on the street in Berkeley, and he said, "I'm playing with a guy right now, and we're wanting to get a band together now. So why don't you come and meet him?" And so Dave brought me in. Adam and I clicked immediately because we found out that we're both into British Isle folk rock, which is a very under the radar genre. There's bands like Fairport Convention and Steel Eye
Mhm.
Span and Pentangle, and they're the bands that inspired Led Zeppelin at the beginning. And I've been a fanboy of that music since I was in my early 20s. And Adam knew about it. So I thought, well, I've never met anybody that actually knows these guys. And he was surprised I knew about it. And so I was in. That's how I got in. And, uh, and then Adam brought in the keyboardist Charlie Gillingham, and Dave, I believe it was Dave that brought in our first drummer, Steve Bowman. And that was the five that made that first record. And,
Well, it's interesting when you said that you met Dave on the street, but did he know you from somewhere? Just said, "Oh, you played bass," or did you have to do some kind of audition or something like that?
No, Dave already knew me because we had been in that band, but it had been a couple of years since we saw each other, and so
Oh, I
Dave
see. I
knew.
see. Right.
Yeah. Dave kind of knew how I played, and just they were that was probably the luckiest week of my life because they were starting to get a band. They were looking for musicians, Dave and Adam. And when Adam sung, I remember Adam told us as kind of a weird homework assignment, go home and pick a song that we can cover. And I brought in "What's Next to the Moon" by AC/DC. And when Adam sung that, I thought, man, we really got a tiger by the tail here because he really was I thought, what a good singer. So that's how that all started, you know.
Oh,
The
well,
five of
thank
you
you.
at that first rehearsal, or was it like three of you, like kind of playing
Good
that
question.
together?
Good question. No, it was the five of us that came in, I believe, that first rehearsal. Yeah. Yeah. But Adam and Dave were playing Round Here and Mr. Jones as a duo, pretty much like they sound on the record, in bars around San Francisco at that time. And then when that band formed, it happened pretty fast. There was a moment I
Yeah.
remember. We were, how being in a band is, like you go to your sound check in the afternoon and then you all go get a burrito in somewhere. You're in San Francisco at a club. And we came back after our burritos and saw a line going around the block and thought that was some club next door where somebody else was playing, and then found out it was for us. And so that was a shock. That was the first shock. So,
And it's San Francisco, so the burritos are excellent, right? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
they're just the best.
you know it. Yes, they are good. They are good.
That's interesting. I
Yeah.
don't think I realized it was all just sort of like one moment of like, okay, we're going from like 2 to 5 in just like kind of a snap of a finger. But
There,
then
there
and
was
again, that ended up being the five that made the record.
Yes, that was the and with Dave Emmerglut guesting actually on that first record, but that was the core five. And but there was a moment that was miraculous, and maybe you guys already have covered this topic, but there was a thing called the Gavin Convention where nine major labels came to the Bay Area. They were looking for talent, and we were already a buzz in the Bay Area, and they had our demo tape, and some people knew about it. So most of the labels came to see Counting Crows, and we played. It was called, oh, I forget the name of the club, the I Beam, I think, and it was the nine labels, including the and of A&M. His name was Andy. I forget his last name, but nine major labels came to see us, and the next morning, nine labels offered us a record deal, and that was
I did
the
hear about
moment.
that part. I didn't know about the convention or anything
Uh
like
huh.
that.
Uh huh.
I,
Yeah.
it's funny going back into. Was there a you said you're from you told me you were from originally from that area,
Mhm.
but what were you? Can I ask what you were doing at the time? Were you looking to like for band to be your career and
Yes.
were
Well,
you,
uh, the good question. I was see, I just turned 27, and I was still living with my parents. I'm not ashamed to admit, and trying to move out here and there, renting a bedroom in someone's house, and then back to my parents' house because I failed again, and I was ready to give up. Counting Crows happened right when I was giving up. I was
Hmm.
okay?
in. I was signed up to go to Oklahoma City to become an air traffic controller. I loved airplanes, and I still love airplanes, and I was ready. I even sold my basses. I don't think I owned a bass. In fact, I can tell you, I didn't own a bass guitar. I had to borrow Dave
Wow.
Bryson's bass. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
to go meet the band, and I was giving up. I was literally giving up, and then everything ignited. You know, so it was
Yeah.
That's kind of
magical.
amazing. Just like walking down the street and like, bam. Like had you not looked up and seen Dave,
Yes,
who knows? That's
yes,
amazing.
I know, I know. Gosh, exactly. The way
That
that the things that life can do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One other just like pre Crows moment I wanted to ask about, and it's actually particularly because you play the bass. And I guess I can go through. I think I looked at the credits of the albums, and on the first album you were also credited for some other guitar, but obviously you were known as the bass player, electric bass, double bass. And then my question is sometimes with bass players is actually how did you get into playing bass, because that's sometimes the instrument that people don't think of right away. Right when you're a kid, oh, I'm going to learn to play the guitar. They don't necessarily
Yes.
think of the bass right away. So
Yes, yes, bass is a background instrument. It's an accompanying instrument, and in reality, it's the bridge between the drums and the rest of the band. It's the part rhythm and part melody. But I was God, the summer before freshman year of high school. My old best friend Mike, his dad bought a guitar and a bass from Sears or Montgomery Ward's, and brought them home. They were like $20 each, and Mike knew how to play a G on guitar. And so I was the bass player, so I played bass, and we taught ourselves Down on the Corner by Creedence Clearwater Revival, and it's that one where the guitar and bass go bum 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 bum, and we played it, and we were shocked that we sounded just like the record. So I was a bass player for life at that moment.
Right.
you know so but you're right, it's an instrument that unless you're Victor Wooten or Stanley Clark, it's an instrument that has to be with an ensemble to help the ensemble sound better, and that's
mm.
the role of a bass. You know.
Can I ask,
And
you what of your bass playing influences were you kind of like thinking towards when you started playing Counting Crows? Like, were you thinking about those like Fairport Convention bass lines, or was there like kind of what was inspiring you from your end,
Yes,
bringing that to the songs?
good question, because the inspirations bleed through no matter what you do, and since it was we were still a product of the late '80s, and it was 1990 actually when I first got in with everybody when they put the first band together, like late I think the fall of '90. So our early demos sound like REM. They're a little more
mm.
polished and a lot of reverb on the guitars and things, and it sounds like the late '80s if you heard the demos.
Yeah,
Um,
like good late '80s music, but very late '80s music.
yes, yes, good, and right at the cusp of the '90s music, and it was T-Bone Burnett, our first producer, that broke us down and said, Matt, I want you to get rid of your fretless bass, although I played it on Mr. Jones and a couple other things, but I want you to buy a vintage bass over there on Sunset Boulevard and see if it has original strings from the 1960s, and that's the bass I want you to play on this record. And the way he described that made me think of playing differently. I know what he was saying, and that was to play like Fairport Convention, play like Van Morrison's bass player, and
Mm.
um, like think of where every note is important, not the tone as much, or the like with a fretless bass, you kind of make it sing and swim, and I just thought of bass playing differently. He made me a songwriter's bass player, T-Bone Burnett. You know,
Hmm.
So that 70s sort of songwritery
yes,
vibe was kind of, yeah.
yes,
Can I ask,
yes.
was that the bass you played on the first tour? Because I was noticing there was a really interesting looking bass you were playing. I was watching like a old show from like Rome '94 yesterday,
Mhm.
and there's like a symbol on, and I was curious what that symbol was, and
Yes.
I thought maybe it was a custom thing, but maybe or was just the bass you found on Sunset.
No, I know the exact one you're talking about. No, that was one of my more high tech basses. That was a fretless Music Man Stingray, and the stick, it's a sticker. I still have that bass, and the sticker is called a Shri Chakra, and it's a symbol. I don't know exactly what the history of a Shri Chakra is, but I just really love the way it looked, so I put it on.
It did look
Um,
very cool.
yeah, thanks.
That's why
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
I was like picking through things. Yeah, it was like it's awesome.
Chris, when
yeah.
he was talking about the producer, did you have, because I saw some of your pre questions, did you have any other questions related to the making of the first album? Because he was kind of touching on that.
Yeah, no, let's. I mean, kind of,
Uh-huh.
let's discuss. I mean, like, what was sort of? Tell us maybe a little bit about that process of making the first record. Like, we know you guys like
Yes,
went into a house, but I'm always curious.
yes.
That's got to be. There's got to be a lot of like I don't know, fun stories from like living in a
Oh yeah.
house with everyone together for that long a
Yes, it
time.
was. Oh, yeah, man, it was awesome. We rented this house in LA. We're all from the Bay Area, lived in the Bay Area, so we're just drive down to LA road trip, and we're living in this sort of McMansion in the Hollywood Hills. Had an elevator, so we had to play with the elevator. All of it, and the making of that record made musicians out of all of us, and it was the producer that did it, T-Bone Burnett. He said, Your demo sounds like a record. Now we're going to make a record that sounds like a demo." And he stripped down the reverb. He took away all the effects. He made me play an older bass, and that first record, I'm so proud of that record because it has a silence to it. If you like the beginning of the first song around here on August and everything after, it comes out of silence and fades in, and the whole record has a silence. And I'm really thrilled with the way T-Bone provided a flagpole and had us all point to that pole and say, "Here's what we're going to sound like. Here's what we're going to do." He also told me there should be no ordinary moments on a record. There's there was, for example, the chorus of "A Murder of One" is eighth notes on bass. It's just bum 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 bum. And I played it, and T-Bone said, "It sounds good, but make that the only time you do that on this record. You don't want to just start doing eighth notes and not making things
Oh, that's
important."
cool.
Yeah, yeah, and he's right. And because he said that, I that's what I did. I didn't do eighth notes anywhere else. So that record's a special record, and the
It is, and
second.
that's actually a really interesting way to think about like no, because there kind of aren't any ordinary moments on that record. It's sort of
Mhm.
just I don't know that as we because we've done part of our podcast we've kind of done sort of discussions of at least the first two records. We're going to do all of them eventually, but it's such a hard record to sort of break down because all of the songs are so specific and it's kind of special in their own way, and I think that
Mhm.
kind of comes back to it. And there's no ordinary moments. There's no like that one's just kind of like flat and it kind of goes through. All of them have these like special unique things about the songs in
Uh-huh.
them.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
so it's interesting you mentioned Murder of One because I believe, and I'll bring up some other ones. I went through and tried to part was my memory, but then I went through the albums and I tried to designate or note what songs you actually got co-writing credit for, and I think Murder of One was one of those. And
Yes.
one thing I've never asked a professional musician who's published work is what's the threshold sometimes to getting writing credit? Because obviously on other songs you're contributing or adding your little flair. I mean, it's not like
Mhm.
Adam is writing every note of every instrument. So
Uh-huh.
what sometimes makes that threshold, like, and what did you bring to Murder of One, for instance?
Yes, very good. Well, I think there are at least three different publishing separations. One is mechanical royalties, and I'm not by no means an expert. I'm just a lucky fool who plays bass. But I know that the way Adam ran things, and a lot of bands do this. We were recommended this by our people around us, that if somebody's in the room while he's composing, whether or not we even make a suggestion that he accepts, we'll get a songwriting credit on that because we might have said something that made him think of a chord. So he's very generous in that way. And I know Murderer One, though, I actually helped write chords. It was Adam and Dave Bryson and I that just went down to Dave's studio and up in Oakland and just wrote that one afternoon. So that was more hands-on. There's also you get on publishing by being the player on that song. So since I play bass on those songs, I get a publishing credit and income and whatever. And I don't know. There's another one, but anyway, as I said, I'm a lucky fool. But yeah,
That's interesting. Maybe
yeah,
as we go along, there's some songs I'll either mention that you either had writing credit for, and you can mention something, or some particularly memorable, and then or you could add your own. I know that in Ghost Train, I find that there's some memorable bass lines in there.
yeah. Yeah, that's a fretless bass. That's that swimmy sound that I really love, and so T-Bone let me play that on that one, and also Mr. Jones is a fretless bass, and yeah, a Ghost Train's a really beautiful song, and we're all fans of Adam. But Adam would come and bang out something on the piano, and you could hear the whole band in his piano.
Hmm.
And he's a songwriter like Burt Bacharach or something, uh, and he's one of those guys that once a week he lays a golden egg, and we all have to figure out how to play it. A songwriter is something that you're born to do, and
Mm.
the reason bands don't last is because they don't have a real songwriter in them necessarily. I mean, there's many ways for bands to break up, but you can tell that bands that started to age over time, their songs got more mediocre. And I don't see that
Mm.
happening with Adam and the guys. He's getting just in a way deeper and more ill, which I admire. I
Mm.
mean, without being an ill person, his songs are just more like troubled, which I admire in the modern Counting Crows catalog.
Mm. Yeah, one
So
thing I was going to say when I introduced you was that, and it's part of the aging process, right? It's actually some things that I studied that if you look at officially, if Counting Crows are I don't know 32, 33 years old, now we're at a point that wow, if you were in the band 15 years, that's less than half, right, of the years of
yes,
existence. But that
yeah,
said, I mean, first of all, it's 15 years is still a long time, but they've only. It depends how you count the covers album, and they have an EP and stuff. But I guess you could at the very least there's 6 studio albums, but you were there for four of those 6.
hmm hmm
And I guess they're most popular for, I guess, by sales, you could argue, is and so that's why we have so much to talk about. But in the so the first House on the Hill was in the Bay Area, where and that's what I was going to say. I think the only 4 albums that they recorded in houses. I think after you were no longer with the band, they recorded not in houses anymore.
I think so. Yeah, they
Were
went to
the
studios. Yeah.
Were the other 3 in the LA area? The other 3
Yeah, in,
houses?
in fact, all of them were in L.A. I think the house that Adam might have referred to up in Berkeley was where we rehearsed and founded our band. Uh, that's on. There's a famous lane down on Virginia and La Loma, which is in Ghost Train, I think, and that's an intersection in North Berkeley. That's where the house was, and
Okay.
uh, and so yeah, we did them all in houses. T-Bone Burnett got us onto that because he said that recording studios reek of despair. So
Okay.
we all said, yeah, let's rent a house. You know, so
And each house was different, right? Each of the
yeah.
4 houses was different. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
the
and they
houses
did
might
some.
have some character. Okay.
Yeah, they had to have some character. The second record we did, "Recovering the Satellites," was done in an awesome house. It was like a giant version of a California craftsman house. I don't know the architect, but it's somebody big, and it was a beautiful house. They did MTV did a thing on us there where they interviewed us in that house, and you can see a lot of it, and that was awesome. You know,
I've
uh,
seen clips on that, and maybe Chris can say there's rumors that recording of that will be released sometime in the future, Matt. So you might.
Yeah, I've heard about HBO possibly doing a documentary. I
Yes.
wasn't even aware of that until I listened to your podcast, which is which is
Okay.
So
But yeah, at least there. I mean, because it's beautiful. It's interesting because of that footage. I feel like whenever I think about the band recording, I think about that because there was so much. I feel like I don't think was video of any of the other three. I think it's a lot of recovering the satellites video when I think of the band in a house knocking out a
yes.
record.
Yes, I don't remember any video being shot in any of the other houses, or at least not much at all. You know, God, imagine now if those records were done with iPhones. Everyone's got an iPhone. It would have been awesome. You know?
Everyone on YouTube.
Yes.
Well, one thing I would ask about the early days or even now, obviously, like when you're on a. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention to you actually is I did. Well, now I'm only talking to you through a computer screen, but I actually did meet you once for 60 seconds. It was at, I think it was the premiere actually, but when you did the World Cafe in Philadelphia for the Hard Candy release,
Uh-huh.
and you did like 4 songs in the, I think it was Tower Records.
Uh-huh.
I was not able to attend that because I think it was only a couple hundred fans and I wasn't there early enough. But after that, if you bought a copy, you could wait in line to have it signed. And I
Uh-huh.
met you there. And then I also loitered around a bit. And then the band actually came. And I mean, it also reminds me of what Adam would talk, because Adam was a music lover. You guys are all music lovers. But after the CD signing, a few of you went and shopped for CDs and you were hanging around just looking at music because you would like music. So I don't think I said, or maybe I just waved to Adam or said hi, but I didn't actually talk to him. But you and Dave, I actually went and talked to. So anyway, I
Uh-huh.
remember you being very approachable and you answered a few of my
Oh.
questions, and then I just didn't want to bother you anymore and I went on my way.
Well,
Um,
I'm happy my reputation is intact and I was polite.
but did so obviously an event like that where fans went or at a concert, I know especially back then, I think it was after the concerts, the bands would meet the fans, but given how popular Counting Crows was, when you were not on tour or where you were back at home in your real life, did you, and even maybe years after you left, did people recognize you as being the bass player of Counting Crows from either
No,
videos, whatever?
no, no. I changed. I gained some weight. I gained. My hair went gray. I got a haircut. I didn't look like I did in the. When I turned, I think 42, 43. I just started to morph. So I wasn't the same. I just didn't look the same. I did get recognized in the '90s. The mid '90s, and I was always thrilled. I was also a very awkward celebrity to talk to Counting Crows fans. I was kind of hyper and embarrassed that they recognized me, and I'm kind of an introvert, I guess, and I had to learn how to kind of be cool, like the teenagers. If they were big fans, I gotta kind of act like Counting Crows bass player. I'm happy to meet you, not bum them out, you know, being a geek, so
But it's funny you said that because I do think that I don't want to say most celebrity because it depends what you're famous for, but things like music and movies and I guess even sports, and I'm thinking other parts of popular American culture, it usually happens between age, 18 and 35.
mhm,
So, and that's certainly usually where the height of the popularity is, no matter what your craft. I mean, there's some, rare examples. Maybe Tom Cruise became, was more even more popular in his 40s or something. But it is
mhm,
weird though, because then people then look back, right at, you're 50 or whatever, and then you look back. So not only was that an exciting time and probably it was all a blur, but it's also a time when you're still kind of finding yourself, right, in
yeah,
some ways. So I
yeah,
don't know, do you think back a lot about that, or just things you might have
yeah.
done differently, and that doesn't necessarily even have to do with the actual music or the band, just
Mhm.
do
Oh,
you
you
have any
mean
thoughts
being
on
that
that?
age? And yeah,
Yeah,
I know
or
what you mean. Yeah, no, good question. I mean, I got married at 33, and that was right after we recorded "Recovering the Satellites." And I look at
okay.
marriage as the beginning of the second half of my life. It was Art Garfunkel that said, "The birth of your first child is the first day of the second half of your life." And in a way, getting married to me was that. It was like now I have a person who's at home and they're thinking about me, and I'm like to get back to them. When kids came, it got a lot harder, a lot worse, that I'm missing out on stuff, and I hung on as long as I could. But I felt like childhood ended when I got married, you know and so I was a 33-year-old child.
In some ways that fit, maybe not for most musicians, but that fits, some people that try to easily like look at the life course and look at like clear mathematical, they would, some people call a young adult 20 to 35, right? And then the
Yeah,
35 to 50 would be kind of middle age or old or, mid
yeah,
adult. So you
yeah,
timed that perfectly, right? The 20 to
yeah.
35, and then you went
You're
on
right.
with that.
It was an
Chris,
accident.
yeah, Chris, did you have a next question?
Well, sure. I'd love to talk about. So obviously, the band made a lot of amazing records, but a lot of the reputation of the band is how incredible y'all were live for so long, continue to be.
Mhm,
And I'm there's something. Obviously, the band has this sort of sui generis way of improvising, right? The sort of what fans, I guess, called alts, right? But that thing of sort of following a direction in the middle of songs, specifically a lot of times, like Murder of One and Round Here.
mhm,
And I was curious about sort of the development of that. Like there's the big story of Adam going like, we're not going to play this the same way every night, so just kind of follow me on this. But
mhm.
kind of what was that like? Because you're kind of following and kind of playing a new song in this old, like, I'm just kind of curious from your perspective what it was like to figure out how to do those things. Because by the end of the first tour, there's these 11-minute versions of Round Here and 15 minutes of Murder of One, and you guys are just flying the whole way through.
Yeah, right. Yes, I remember Adam early on. It started to scat and improvise on the songs in the middle sections. And I remember early on, a lot of people kind of wouldn't listen to him, or they'd kind of play their part, and he had to scold the band at that early in those early days to go with him. And so it was something that was just trial and error over years that we all got better with over time. And because he's really good at improv. Adam's a really good musician. He's not just a great songwriter, but like for example, the solo to Long December is Dan. It's a 3-note solo, just da 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 da. Da. Adam sung that to Dan because Dan was having trouble trying to come up with a solo, and Adam just went and sung it and played air guitar. And so Dan taught himself that, and that's the solo of A Long December. So Adam, Adam's a without being academic or ever going to school, he's a really natural musician and knows how to improvise over things with his voice. And so we had to all kind of rise up to that level, and not at least not disappoint him. When he goes off a cliff, he wants us to catch him. And
But it was probably a fun challenge too, right? It just
yeah,
maybe to keep you on your toes a little bit during the show, right? Instead of
yeah.
just playing the same way. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. The band is a very bored band because playing I remember in the 90s Adam would often avoid playing Mr. Jones just because he was so pissed off having to play Mr. Jones so many times. And so to try to break out of that box, touring is a lot like being in prison. You just have to do the same thing every day. You resort to lifting weights in the hotel, and you have to like just do the same things. So the band started to really to Adam leading us started to try to reinvent our tours, to stop from going crazy. You know,
Yeah.
rock music by nature is built on parts. You play a bass part and you just repeat that stupid bass part, and we tried to avoid that at every corner. Stop playing parts.
Mm. Yeah, no, I get that. As I said, that's why I empathize with either comedians or as I said, even a teacher. Even if I know like what joke or what thing the students love to hear every time, going through it every time the same way, you just feel like that. Yeah, you want to change it up a little bit
Yeah,
and keep yourself
yeah,
motivated,
Any
yeah.
of
not you'll
those
burn out.
improvisations that are memorable to you, or that you did a lot, where you were like, I loved every time we did this in Round Here or Murder of One, or
Ah, yeah. So the Murder of One. You just said there. I remember the Murder of One was kind of magical because it was such an explosive chorus. And I remember being in Scotland. I think it was Glasgow, and in Scotland the gigs are really wild because I guess
Mm.
the people are really drunk or something, but they love their rock and roll, and they start stomping, and the whole venue is like shaking from the stomping. And I remember watching that audience lift up on the outro chorus of Murder One because of a long build up and all this the suspense. And Adam just launched us into that outro chorus, and the place erupted, and that was a magical moment. I can't tell you what year exactly. Maybe it was around the mid '90s.
Okay.
90. Yeah, yeah.
Recovering the satellites, you think,
Uh,
or I'm
uh,
curious to go back and
Good
try to find
question.
this now. Actually,
Yeah, good question. I think it was after Recovering the Satellites was out, so we were touring that record,
okay,
and yeah, yeah. So no,
It-
maybe
it-
before. It was probably like 95.
could have been 94 and okay, okay.
Yeah, 94,
as
95.
someone that just saw a couple shows, Counting Crows in England last year for the first time, it's still like that. The crowds are so much more enthusiastic, and I don't
Mm.
think it's just the alcohol, because a lot of Americans get drunk at those crow shows, but
Uh-huh.
they also are playing with their phone and talking to people next to them. It's
Yeah.
just that over in the UK they get more into it, and they. Yeah, I'm not surprised at that, and they kind of know when the magic part. They get into they know when the magic parts are, and show their approval of those
Yeah.
parts. So
Awesome.
it's still that way. Were they,
Yeah.
kind of related to Chris' question, were there two or three songs that you loved playing live? Now it might have been because you love the song, or just
Uh,
maybe you didn't play it enough. So when you did, or it was just yeah. Was there any that
yeah.
you love to see on the set list?
Gosh, good question. I think of our heyday of the first two albums and the tour of the first two albums, and after that we started to get a little older. We are started getting into our middle age, you could say, after 35. Like I
Yeah.
think and that's kind of a different era of Counting Crows to me. So after like 99, right around 99, and so um, before that, those first two records are just loaded with great songs. And in my personal opinion, the ones that I was on after Recovering the Satellites, they have jewels on them, like real gems, but not every moment is magical like those first two records. And so, like, there's a song, Saint Robinson and His Cadillac Dream. That's a
Hmm.
magical song to me.
Hmm.
Um, there's a few. There's one that's like Burt Bacharach. Thought I might get a rocket ride. Um,
Oh, all my
uh,
friends.
all my
Friend.
I
friends.
was just yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. See, you guys are fans. All my friends.
Yeah.
Yes,
So give us a prompt,
yes, yes. That's a magical song. That's like that's the level of to me Burt Bacharach or Jimmy Webb. You know, and they're a little more rare after the second record, in my opinion. But I'm sorry, Eric. What was your original
Oh,
question?
it was just that there was there a certain song. And by the way, those two, I think those two were always great live. So those could have been Saint Robin. But I said, was there like two or three songs that you, when you saw it on the set list, you're like, oh, great, I love playing this song
Ah,
live.
yes, those two
So
are good examples of them. If it was from the first couple of records, anything, I'd be happy
anything,
to play.
okay.
Yes, I loved Anna Begins. I love playing Anna
Hmm.
Begins because the chorus was such a release. It goes to a major feel, and it's the Dave Bryson's guitar is so beautiful, and I love that playing Anna Begins live. I love playing Omaha live.
Oh,
Um, there was a moment actually when after we made the record. A record is like going into a microscope. You're going into this thing and all your little parts. So all of us went through that. And our first rehearsal after the record, we went back up to the little house in North Berkeley, and we all played Omaha, and we were laughing because we sounded just like the record. We couldn't believe it. So it's because everyone knew their parts so well, And
I mean, Anna Begins is an interesting one because that's one that of course the sound changed. The live version,
yeah,
right? It was a little harder, I guess, a little more guitar-y.
yeah,
But you obviously still love playing it alive. I think
yeah.
both versions are great. So
Yeah, yeah, true. No, Adam's a big Adam and Dave Emmergluck and I were all fanatics of a fellow named Richard Thompson. Have you
mhm.
ever heard of Richard Thompson? He's under the
Mhm.
radar. That's all right. You know him, Chris. He co-founded Fairport Convention with his first members, and he went on to become a solo artist. And he has two incarnations. One of them is solo acoustic, and the other is with an electric band. And they're always awesome because he's such a great musician. And Adam mirrored Richard a little bit in having acoustic sets and quieter songs mixed with more raucous versions.
I'm actually
Yeah.
curious. How did you like doing the sort of skipping ahead. I'm curious to go back to the Recovering the Satellites recording, but doing the prep and doing all those acoustic sets to do MTV VH1 storytellers. Like, did you like that process of like rearranging all the songs to be acoustic, or was that interesting or
Yeah,
fun?
I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Not everyone was happy about that. Our drummer, Steve, was a very rock and roll drummer, and he didn't like acoustic feeling things, which all of us kind of argued with him over. And also what Adam told the guys in the band, there were a couple of them that had trouble kind of reinventing their parts or their on their instruments for an acoustic feel. They just played the same parts on an acoustic instrument. And Adam had to explain, don't just unplug and play what you play.
Hmm.
Try to get into this new feel, and it involves having really good antenna as a musician to reinvent a song like that. You know,
Yeah,
Was there
no,
one of
that,
those rearrangements that you really liked of those acoustic songs where you were like, "Oh, this acoustic version is great."
uh, good question. I mean, I saw Anna. I think of Anna Begins immediately when you say that. We
Mm.
did an acoustic version, but it's very similar to the electric, just quieter. Um, the I mean, there's not a lot of there wasn't like a full reinventing into the acoustic
Mm.
sets,
what do you think, Chris? I should have prepared for that question. I almost think Matt's work in Angels of the Silences stands out
Mm.
for the acoustic version. I don't know if you remember how much you remember of that, Matt, but
Uh-huh,
Yeah, I
uh,
agree there.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, I don't remember a whole lot, honestly. Angels Aside, I probably played an acoustic bass on that. Did I
yeah,
play? Yes, I never did upright on
I
that. I
think
don't
so.
think, unless you found something, or
Yeah, I
did you?
could.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Angels of Silences was kind of a punk song. Charlie came up with the music to that, and Adam sung the song over it. And it was a high energy song, so acoustic version of that was pretty cool. But I don't
Yeah,
have strong memories of it.
for some reason the bass sticks out with me again. This is just from memory. Now, I just want this is just some of this is going to be random, just to tie off what you did before. Like when you mentioned this Desert Life, you're saying in kind of off the cuff that Saint Robinson and All My Friends, and actually those might be my two favorite songs. That they or I think they're both special. But
Hmm.
interestingly, you have writing credit to a song on Desert Life that is one of the fans' favorites. That Chris and I try to figure out. We think it's the longest drought where it hasn't been played, but maybe it'll come back soon. Which is actually Amy hit the atmosphere.
Oh, that's a great song. That's one of those gems. Yeah, yeah. I played upright bass on that one, and that's a great song. Yeah. I don't know why they're not playing it live.
Yeah, hopefully it might come back. Sometimes I think that he'll remember it or someone will mention it and it'll.
Yeah.
But we think that hasn't been played since actually the original when the album was released. That tour,
Oh,
the original tour. So
wow, wow. I wonder
it was
why.
fun.
Adam probably doesn't like it. I don't know. Don't know why
Yeah,
they
or
wouldn't.
maybe just forgot it or whatever. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, Chris, did you have I mean, I have sorts of all sorts of.
Yeah, we have all sorts of questions, but I mean,
Well,
one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going about this about the one last thing about the house on the hill, and I think you even mentioned it in another interview when the second three houses on the hill or whatever were all in the LA area. I know that you could go home and sleep there, but did you ever sleep actually sometimes also in the recording house?
Yes. Let's see. The first record, I wasn't married yet. I wasn't living in LA. The second one, Recovering the Satellites, I also was living in that house. So I lived in the first two houses.
Okay.
And in the third one, I had a home and a wife at home, not a family yet, or not kids yet. And so I did sleep there if I was sleep deprived. There was a nap room, that I'd go sleep in. So there, there was some strange things happened in that house. Honestly, I can't tell you what was the record that we made after Recovering the Satellites. I can't. It's strange. I
Well,
can't.
Desert
Hard
Life,
candy.
This does.
Oh,
Oh,
Desert Life is there. Sorry, Desert Life
okay,
and then Hard
okay.
Candy.
Desert
and
Life.
then Hard
Right.
Candy #4. Yeah.
Number four, thank you. And so I remember making that record had some incredible coincidences. Charlie, our keyboardist, is very scientific. He's a fan of science and statistics and even astronomy. And we had to figure out the chances of this happening. I was going to buy a bass guitar that's called a Paisley bass. It's made in the late '60s. It's a vintage bass, Fender Paisley bass, because it has a pink paisley finish on it, and I didn't know whether to buy it or not. And then Bill Thompson, who passed away, he was our man. our tech guy. He did all the guitars with us on all the records, or the second one on. And I was taking a nap in that nap room, and Bill came and said, "There's a guy calling from a guitar shop about this Paisley bass." So I went out into the hallway, and there's what's it called? A father clock, those big clocks, grandfather clock,
Mm,
I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on the face it says Matt Paisley. And so I'm picking up the phone right near this clock. I guess the brand of the clock was Matt Paisley. And I was so freaked out about that. And I went down, and the band's like laughing and going, "Why do you worry about this stuff?" But me and Charlie got together because I was saying it's really an unusual coincidence. And Charlie had a number, and it was big, of how that could not have happened. So we those are the kind of things we'd go through, you know.
Did
Yeah,
you get
I'm
the
not.
bass?
Yes, I bought the bass. Yes.
Okay. And was it a good did you end up using it for a while?
I
Was it
did. In
meant to
fact,
be?
yes, it was meant to be. In fact, when we did some shows with the Who, and I played my Paisley bass opening for the Who, I'm happy to say. you know,
That was actually
Uh,
one thing I wanted to ask about. Like, what was it like? Any stories from opening for like the Stones and the Who and playing some of those bigger shows with them? Because
yeah,
obviously with the Stones, it was like actual stadiums, right? It was like giant
yeah,
stadiums. And stuff
yeah.
like that.
They were, and that was on our first record. Actually, we did 10 or 12 shows with the Stones on their Voodoo Lounge tour, and I remember sound checking in the arenas, and they would say, "Okay, give me some bass guitar." This is in the afternoon when they're trying to get all the mic lines levels and the volumes, and I'd play a bass note, and 80,000 chairs are pointing at me, empty chairs that are acting like little mirrors. And I would hear my bass come back a couple of seconds later, and it was the weirdest effect. And standing on a stage of a stadium and doing that, and opening for the Stones, including a show we did later in Vienna back in '03. Uh, the way the weather, like a storm would come and then it would clear up. It felt like it felt like God was there with you to do your show, because there's so many people gathered in one place. And the Stones were magnificent, but I was more excited about opening for the Who, because I'm a Who fanatic. But opening for the Stones on those shows made me a Stones fan. uh, but I'll tell you, opening for the Who was even more exciting for me because I love the Who.
Did you get to meet those guys? And
Yeah, yeah, we met them briefly. They're very aloof, but they're very polite. Immergluck and I were standing at the stage door before they were going on, and Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey just kind of walked over to us and just sat there. And Pete Townsend just leaned on a road case and looked at us both. And he's there with his beautiful giant nose, and he's looking at me and Dave, and we just said hi, and they shook our hands and just walked on stage and started their show. And that was like a couple of gods, It was awesome, you know.
I mean, it is funny how that turns, right? Because to me, I'd rather meet you, right, than Pete Townsend, but that's just because I'm a Cruz fan. So I know that they're legends, but
Yes.
just given your personality, I know you joked you're kind of shy and reclusive as a teenager, which I think a lot of people are.
Mm.
But I noticed on some of and I don't watch as many of the. Chris is our live expert, but I have seen some of the earlier live shows. And it was interesting that you and Dave, because of the makeup of the band, were asked to be more front and center, even with some, to get the crowd going or to show off a little bit of the guitar. And then later,
Mm.
of course, as Emmy and Dan were there, maybe you more in the back and not as many as those front and center guitar solos. Personality wise, which did you prefer? I mean, it was probably fun to experience both,
Yeah.
but do you have any comment on that?
You mean the pressure of like having to act like I'm a rock star or something on
Yeah, that
stage?
kind of thing. It
Yes,
kind of made me
yes,
laugh a little bit
yes.
because later, of course, you were back, with Charlie and the drummer in the
Yes,
band
I was
playing.
happy to go back there because it was so cringy to me, because I never I've felt fat my whole life. I'm kind of fat now, but I wasn't really fat then. I've always been a little a little bit fat. I've never been really skinny, but I've always been very self conscious of my body image. And to go, I was told, Adam said, look like you're into it, especially on my solo of Children in
Yeah,
Bloom. There's a moment like, go stand in front of the stage, put your foot on the monitor, and be a rock star.
yeah.
and I did it, but every time I hated it. I really
Okay.
hated,
I
you know.
think you did it well, and that's why I asked the question is because my instinct, and I feel the same about Dave too. And I'd love to ask him about it at some point because
Mm,
obviously he was the only guitar player in the beginning, and then
yeah.
also had a lot more. And then the current tour, they joked about that because was it Dan was out for a little bit sick, so Dave
Mhm.
had a kind of quote unquote be lead guitar a little bit. But
Ah,
I just in my impression as a fan watching for all these decades is that you and Dan didn't mind, doing that in the front, but it's not as much of your personality. So you were more than happy to just kind of hang out and do your part in the back too. So
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. When in fact when Emmerglick joined, and now we become like a way bigger band. I was very happy to have my own riser back there with the drums, and just play with Ben and Jim Bogus and Charlie on my left, and I was right at home there. I was at peace. I could just play bass and try to look cool, in case anyone's looking. But I'm not trying to get attention. I hated doing that. You
yeah,
know.
and that was a very '90s thing, of course, to be the guitar solos in the front. Maybe
Yes,
a holdover from the '80s and
Mm.
'70s, I guess, too.
yes,
But
Yeah.
definitely.
just because you mentioned it up, and I'll go right to Chris. Is do you have I think for kind of hardcore fans, I do think Children of in Bloom comes across as one of your a performance, I guess, that stands out, or people say, "Oh, Matt's great work on Children in Bloom." Do you have a comment, or do you think that's warranted, or not? Do you have
Uh,
anything about that song?
I'm proud of that bass part because it's very melodious. It's not like a normal bass. It's not behaving like a bass guitar on the chorus. It's acting like
Mm.
maybe a synthesizer, or it's doing something that another instrument probably should do. So I've enjoyed that bass part because of that. But the bass part I'm most proud of is one of the last things I recorded with the band, and that's "Accidentally in Love" for Shrek
Hmm.
Two.
Okay.
That's a very hard bass part because it's a mixture of legato and staccato, meaning long held out notes and then just short little notes, and you have to play it exactly one way. So I'm really proud of that bass part.
Hmm.
It's a hard bass part. Um, Also, around here, I'm really happy with because we were recording, and I was told go think of a bass part that's not normal for around here, and I actually didn't do anything. I just waited until I was sitting in the studio, and they were working with me, and I just started to play off of Adam's voice, and that became the bass part of around here, and I'm really thrilled with that bass part too. It's not a normal bass part, you know.
And you got a Grammy nomination for that accident. So it's not just that
An
you
Oscar.
got
And
an
also,
Oscar, sorry, an Oscar nomination. So it's not just that in that you had writing credit, but you're actually very proud of. You're saying it's maybe um, much more difficult than it would appear, that or much more
yes.
complicated.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I actually wrote part of that song. I can tell you exactly a moment is accidentally and dun dun dun. That is all me. I wrote that. Totally, so no one can say I didn't write that.
So Chris,
So,
before I cut you off, Chris.
No, I was saying, but it's actually, but the one interesting thing to talk about there is sort of those pieces. I'm actually kind of curious because we did a deep dive into recovering the satellites
mm,
a month or so ago, and there's a lot of parts in there that are kind of Beatlesy, for lack of a better term. And I know you're a big Beatles fan. You've got a writing credits on Catapult and I'm Not Sleeping. Was that? I was just
mm.
kind of curious with that if you were part of trying to bring those types of sounds to that record because it is noticeable when you really sort of sit down and break those songs down.
Yeah, there were like even though I didn't play maybe strings or synthesizers, I know that by being around, there were things maybe I suggested to Charlie or anybody that I'm sure were inspired by Beatles. I mean, all the whole band loves the Beatles, so
Mm.
I can't claim any credit, but um, yeah, I also sense a Beatles influence in that on that record, with the strings as well, you know.
Yeah.
As someone who you said you love that first record and you appreciate it, but I know you said that maybe your second favorite record is the second one. And how much fun or interesting or your thoughts? I'm guessing it's the same as the whole band about having that record be such a different sound. I mean, still keep in some ways the Counting Crow sound, but
Mm.
like I love Catapult. I love that you got writing credit. It's just one of my favorite songs, and then
Mm.
it kicks off that second record, and it's so different than anything that came before. Even though I love everything before. Do you have
Mm.
any? What would you like
Yeah.
to comment on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Adam wanted that second record to be a juiced up version of the band. He wanted us to just juice everything up, and we got Dan Vickery to join and as a lead guitarist, and Dan added a little bit of an Americana country feeling. The beauty of the first record, though, is that it's not it's like Neil Young's Harvest. That's which one
Hmm.
of the great records in my life. I think that's Neil's first record. It's trying to be country, but it's not. You can't say that it's a country record. It doesn't sound like that at all,
Yeah.
but it fools you into thinking it might be, and it's a great illusion. It's just a songwriter's record. Harvest and the first Counting Crows record. The second one, by juicing things up, I feel like we took a risk, but it still paid off. That record is really well done, you know.
Yeah.
And the strength is in the songwriting. Again, it's the having a great songwriter will keep the quality level high, because you
Yeah.
could sing Lady Madonna at a campfire on an acoustic guitar and it would still sound like Lady Madonna, and that's the strength of a great song. So we can make a country version of a Counting Crow song, and if it's a good song, it's still a good song.
Yeah, I think, and we talk. I think that record really holds up and feels very current, both sort of sonically, in part because I think the 20-year rule, everything's throwing back to the 90s, but also songs about feeling like disconnected from the world are very on topic for the last 3 years of everyone's lives. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I feel distant and I feel like I'm changing in this weird space. It's
yeah,
fairly, yeah, it's on brand.
It,
Um
yeah, yeah.
just because I didn't want to forget, if you've listened to any of the a couple of the times we had a guest and we interviewed Jeff Harkness, who is kind of trying to act as a Counting Crows historian. We like to joke with
Yes,
him,
I,
and
I heard
he
his
gets
voice. Yes, I listened to that. Yes,
yeah.
all right. I
And
think I
so
heard you.
he submitted one question, which was that when you change drummers, particularly from Steve to Ben, and of course you were there in that brief period where you played with Jim as well. I said I remember that because I got to see a lot of shows of the Hard Candy tour, and that's
Hmm.
when you and Jim were there in that little crossover period.
Hmm.
But particularly when you went from Steve to Ben. Um, how did that change the band's sound, either playing or recording or songwriting? It doesn't have to be about personality, but just changing drummers does change things.
Yes,
So
yes. I remember Ben stood out. I love Steve. I love Steve Bowman. All of us did. He was a high tech drummer. He was like a Peter Gabriel drummer. He knew how to. The way he sat at his kit, his body language was just. He really knew what he was doing. So he's a great musician. When Ben joined, the feel of Ben's beat was different. It felt more natural in a way to play bass to. I remember Murder of One chorus, the way where he put his snare, and the way Ben's beat felt, it kind of excited me there in that department. I'm fans of them both, but they're so different. It's like apples and oranges. Yeah.
okay,
And then
Mhm.
what about
yeah,
that transition to Jim? Like, what was the difference with Jim versus Ben?
Jim is probably my favorite drummer. In fact, he is. Jim's my favorite drummer because he's the blend of everything. He had Steve Bowman's skill and Ben's feel, and could play anything. He's a natural musician and a really accomplished drummer. And so we only recorded one song together, and it got us all Oscar nominations. That was Accidentally in Love, and I feel like Jim's a large part of that because I could really tuck into his drums. He brought out the best bass player in me in the studio, and so Jim's my favorite drummer of that band.
Hmm.
He's
yeah.
also a really good guy. So.
Yeah, all three, of course, are great and added to something. But it's funny you said that because I am not a musician, right? I consider myself more of a commentary, but I kind of always felt that way about Jim, that he kind of had kind of the best of those two. But then
Yeah.
and then, as you said, well, I've heard he's a great guy. I haven't met him a couple times, but I don't know him that well. But he also brings not only those two, but also had that enthusiasm too, right?
Yeah.
He had a little jolt of youth, right? Because he was 10 years
Yeah.
younger than everybody.
Yeah.
And he still has that. If you see him in the show, he acts 20 years younger than everybody,
Good,
even though
good,
he's still
good.
10 years. So no, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't, I do, Chris. Well, if I guess I did want to talk a little. We've been asking all these questions of like, oh, here are things that we've always wanted to know. But
Mhm.
I did want to give you some opportunity about to talk about yourself. One of them is that I know it's been mentioned otherwise, but maybe you wanted to share a little bit, and it doesn't have to be too much about the Indian music influence, and you talked about. Yoga, and your travel to India, and it's even been mentioned in some of the liner notes of the
Mm.
CDs.
Oh
So
yeah,
for kind of fans that know the band but maybe haven't listened to your other interviews or didn't know as much as we know, did you want to talk about that at all?
yeah, that's nice to hear, Eric. Well, I'm a type of person. There you can spot us in the world. I've been to India, and I've before Counting Crows. Even I was reading all the seeking books. There's modern philosophers like Alan Watts and Joseph Campbell, and I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, um, the Ramayana, and I was getting into Indian text and Indian because I was looking for I'm a type of person that's looking for answers, that have nothing to do with the outside. I want to kickstart something inside myself, and I want to perfect myself. I want to. There's a reason we're alive, and as life ticks by, is it really just money and job? And I'm one of those guys. I'm riddled with anxiety. I'm in a spiritual crisis.
Mhm.
Well, welcome to the club, and it hasn't gotten any. And I noticed the anxiety hasn't changed too much as I've gotten older. So
Yes, right, right. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It keeps you on your toes, And so I discovered a type of meditation, and there's a guru, and I'd always thank her on our records in different ways, and I'd still do it today. She passed away in 2011, but
okay.
it's a meditation that involves the Kundalini and the chakras, and and I believe in it. When I go to these seminars and sit and meditate with a big group of people, and it's a very benign and simple thing. You just hold your hands out and put your attention at the top of your head, and until you can feel like a little cool wind or even some heat, and then you get a sense of peace that comes with that. And I've been doing it since the late '80s, and there's no money involved. I mean, much to my parents' horror, they thought I joined a cult, and a sex cult or something. But it's very common sense. So, but there's people like me all out there in the rock world. It's kind of few and far between. It's the rock world is littered with very bitter, sort of atheistic and bitter vibes, which is just the way people are. I think that's most of the world, and I don't blame them. I don't blame it because everyone's kind of pissed off. Being alive hurts, So, you know,
And I think
Mhm.
some people that are attracted to being a musician or would even be willing to go on the road attracts a certain personality that might get into that and substance abuse. It's all linked together because like a selection effect, I think.
yeah.
Um, for someone who was interested in learning more, did you have a particular way for people to find out about
Oh,
this?
yeah, thanks, Eric. It's called Sahaja Yoga. It's spelled Sahaja, and then the word yoga, and you can find it all over the internet. You can find talks on YouTube. It's everywhere. But it's just not popular. There's no certificate that says you've graduated, so people don't gravitate toward it. It's like water.
How,
So
how much time did you spend in? I only say this because I'm someone who spent quite a bit of time traveling because of, like you said, anxiety and learning about the world and knowing that just life is not just the rat race. Then if I did that I wouldn't know about other things on there.
mm,
One of the countries I did not travel to was India. Not that I'm not interested. I've heard it's not necessarily an easy place to travel, unless you, of course, maybe have friends there already. But I have heard, including one of my exes, and I had another friend that said, was also maybe as well traveled than me. They said it wasn't always their favorite place. Some of them it was, but they said that maybe no other country changed them as much as India. So that always
yeah.
reminded me of you when they said that because I know that
Uh-huh.
you felt that way. How long did you spend there when you were traveling there? And
I well, the longest at one point, I've been there probably 20 times or more over the
hmm.
years, but the longest was 3 months, maybe 4 months, during one of the Counting Crows breaks. I got to stay there for a really long time and kind of live there. and it does something to you. It's the chaos and the smog and the smells, and lepers rolling up to you on skateboards and banging you for money, and but everyone's happy. The relationship with matter is very healthy there. If it's not broken, you don't need to paint the car, you don't need to paint the building. If it works, just leave it alone. It's okay.
Hmm.
Don't worry about it. And the I just it does change you. India changes you. It's stressful at first, but if you can manage to stay there for a few weeks, you start to relax into it.
Yeah,
And
that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you saying it
mhm.
reminds me of something that I just heard on a clip on the Bill Maher actually yesterday, where this woman is a war correspondent, right? She's been to so many wars, but she goes she's only been attacked once, which was a year ago on the New York subway.
Wow.
Right,
Yeah.
it punched it, but it was just a random attack. Some person just came up and punched her in the face. So I don't know.
Wow.
It just, but when you're talking about
Yep.
the anger and angst that in some of
Yeah.
these other countries might have other difficulties,
Yeah.
but she didn't experience that.
A colleague was
Um,
working in India once, talking about like learning and that sort of patience. I was like, "Oh, you were late to this meeting." He's like, "Yeah, um, they were in India at the time. And they were like, we got stuck behind an elephant on the way in, and you get to the office when the elephant says you get to the there's not no honking is going to make that change, and so that patience
Yes.
level of just like the traffic will be what the traffic will be, and we will get there
Yes.
when we get there, and
Yes, that idea of time, like being that, like this thing that has to work, is not in India, And I remember trying to get on a plane, and we were told, "Oh, it's going to be a 10-hour wait. The plane is 10 hours late. It hasn't left another country." And there were tears, people were crying, and it's all these Westerners getting on the plane, and you get on, and people are preening in mirrors and mad that their seats being has luggage on it, and you realize, no, oh, that's right, we're going back to the West, where everyone's all uptight, And, like if I get the kahunas someday, I'm gonna move my family to India. We're just gonna go live there. You know.
This is a perfect segue. I think now I knew some of it. I was asking you right before we pressed the record button, but of some of the work you've done since Counting Crows, and I know that one of the albums you released was Indian Influence. Maybe you can talk a bit about that. And as I said, I knew of another single that I had listened to of you of so just other. And then you were on tour last year with something else. So maybe if you can talk about some of your other music projects post Crows.
Yeah, well, I've been stalking my heroes in music, and I've managed to collaborate with at least four members of Fairport Convention. Uh, I
that's
made a
awesome.
solo record that got signed by an English label early on. That was back in like '08, and I played all the instruments myself, and that was kind of my letter to the world. And that's got the picture of my guru on the cover, and it's all songs. She told me to write songs, and so I started doing that. I did a couple of cover songs, and that record actually got legitimately signed by a label, and I was really proud of that. And it was called Voice Print, and they'd had all the Yes records on at the time, and through Voice Print, I got to meet the singer of Yes, John Anderson, and I collaborated with John, wrote a song with him. Uh, so little different little mountaintops, you know. I mean,
And I just want to tell people listening that is still available. I mean, Amazon. I know you can get it by CD and MP3. Matt Malley, "Goddess Within," right? Is the
yeah,
title of that? Yeah.
yeah, the goddess within, which was kind of my own little name for the Kundalini, which is the feminine, the divine, like a divine sort of thing, and that we're all born with, and it's in the feminine form, and like the spirit or the Atman in the heart is the spark is the masculine, and the Kundalini is the feminine, and when they unite at the top of the head is when you get your enlightenment. So that's my whole goal in life, right there. So, you know.
Did you? And then you were on tour last year with a Queen cover band.
Yeah, playing the music of Queen, and that was really cool. Just back on a tour bus, sitting in a restaurant and eating a steak, and just being on my iPhone, and then just playing for 4,000 people. And they're such nice guys, and they're such great musicians. They're killer musicians in that band. You have to be, I guess, to play Queen's music, and they're all from Glasgow. They're from Glasgow, Scotland, and Northern England. And so there was always a cup of tea brewing on the bus, and it was just a time of my life. I spent a whole year, 9 months on the road with them, and it was just awesome. You know,
How did that get? Or how did that happen? How did you?
that good question. That happened. A friend of mine plays bass with Jethro Tull's guitar player. His name's Martin Barr, and the bass player, my friend Alan, and I hooked up when he was in L.A. And I told him I'm looking for something. Let me know if you got anything out there. I just want to play bass again. And he said coincidentally, his friend called him that morning that was looking for a stand-in for the Queen tribute band, and so he got me on the phone with him, and I couldn't understand a word he said because when you talk to somebody from Glasgow, you just can't understand. I mean, you don't know what they're saying, and so we just kind of made a plan for me to learn the songs. I had 4 days to learn 2 hours of Queen songs, and then meet them up in Northern California and jump on the tour bus. And I stayed with them for 9 months, just because we really got along great.
Are you working on any projects now that'll be touring, or any
Uh,
albums, or?
Not really, Chris. My son Tonson, he's 23 years old. He tells me to make another solo record. That's where it's at, and it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. I got a piano for my 60th birthday. My wife got me a piano, and I've started playing the folk songs that I love, the UK
Hmm.
traditional music, and arranging them for piano, which is unique. And I'm going to start just making. I put a YouTube up there of playing. That's where you heard me, Eric. When
Yes,
you sent
that's
your
where I
first.
just finally decided to contact you,
Uh,
was when you put that
yeah.
um, that song. That was great. So if people
Which
want
song was it
to,
for
yeah,
people who aren't having?
Oh, it's called "The Hills of Greenmore." It's a 200-year-old Irish folk song, and you can just find it on YouTube. You can type Matt Malley, "The Hills of Greenmore," and there's my YouTube channel with 5 videos, and it's viral with 400 views or something. So anyway, but I'm proud of it. you know.
but if
400 is a lot more. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there with 5. So
Oh, true.
but if people want to either follow what you're doing or get, besides maybe if they didn't know about your solo CD and pick that up, would be nice. But besides that, your YouTube page is a good way to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to actually contact me too, I guess, if you wanna if you wanna shoot me a message, I'll get a bell on my phone because I literally get one a month, and it'll be like, "Oh, wow." And, yeah,
How
that's
cool I was
Oh,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
how cool was that? And I know you mentioned in another interview, but also, and maybe other band members did that. Well, I know Adam, no, because he lives in an apartment in New York. But I know just from hearing people talk that both you and Dave Bryson, I guess, while being members of the Crows, and could use some of that early success money to build a studio in your home.
Yeah.
How cool is that? And I heard you on one interview saying that your son has been using it, or one of your
Yes.
sons at
Yes, he
some
took it
point.
over. Yeah, he took it over.
Okay.
I don't recognize anything in there anymore. Computers, the software, I can't do anything. But yeah, that's like for a musician and a songwriter, a studio is like a cathedral. You can build your own cathedral, and now you can do it with a laptop and two speakers and a good preamp and a microphone, and you can make records, broadcast quality albums on a little desk, and it's a great time to be a musician. You know, but for right now, though, I'm in love with my piano and my folk
Oh,
songs.
so that's the instrument. I mean, it's so neat talking to professional musicians, which I can't relate to. I mean, of course, I played a couple instruments in elementary school or whatever, but a
Mm,
lot of them seem to like your expertise was in the bass, but you love other instruments, right?
mhm.
You love the yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a piano player first. When I was like 7 years old, I was taking piano lessons, and then when I became on my trips to India, I started falling in love with Indian music, different types of Indian music. There's Qawwali music, and Northern Indian, Southern Indian, Karnataka, and I started to realize how awesome those musicians are. So I'm a student of Indian slide guitar as well, and actually on my YouTube channel, there's another video of me playing my beginner's version of Indian slide guitar. But I'm a fan of that instrument. It dawned on me now, like in my late middle age or whatever, that I'm not a bass player or a piano player. I'm a musician who plays instruments, and everyone should
Yeah.
think like that. You
Yeah.
know, like you never think of Paul McCartney as the bass player of the Beatles, mainly because they're so awesome that the songs outshine anything. But in Counting Crows, I was proud to be Counting Crows bass player, but I'm learning later in life that I play bass, but I'm a musician, and I didn't think that early on when I was
Mm.
younger. You know,
No,
I just I
it's. I think it's clear to the fans too. And I just wanted to
Hmm.
say, and I want to say this to all the band members at some point. But I know, as you said, Adam's a special talent. Clearly, both with his lyrics, his musicianship, that's what and it helped make the kind of Crow special. And he was a great, or is a great frontman. But I think for someone who really is into the Crows as much as Chris and I think it is also a special band about the talent of all the other musicians. I mean, it's just so clear that your bass wasn't as incredible, and Dan's and Dave's, what he brought to everything, and Charlie as a keyboard. I mean, it was all of the parts of it.
That's nice of you to
Uh,
say, Eric. It's I mean, Counting Crows is 99% Adam, and the band knows it. But those records were made because of the way five guys got along. Five or six. And I played bass parts because maybe somebody either suggested something or played something that made me do this, or Adam sung something, and everyone's like that. So those records are the product of those five or six guys. So it's
Yeah.
nice of you to say that. You know.
Yeah. And the live shows, I mean, like I think if you guys weren't having such interesting musical conversations together, we wouldn't all be listening to concerts from 30 years ago now.
Mhm.
I think there's something about those shows, and if that was just, you know, anyone of the band, if it was just Adam, I don't think it would be the same. But it's the fact that all of you guys can kind of, the way you all talk to each other, that
Mhm.
created this very, again, I think the band has this incredibly unique way of improvising that is so, I think it's one of the things I always just find fascinating, that you guys developed your own thing that I don't think anyone else has done quite like before or since. I don't have never found anyone who sort of does it like you guys did, especially at that time.
Yeah, interesting, Chris. I remember in the '90s we were compared early on to Hootie and the Blowfish, and I like Hootie and the Blowfish. They're cool, but Adam hated the comparisons because he was very much about his words, his lyrics, and
mm.
that we're not that type of band where it's like we were trying to make no ordinary moments in all of our songs. I mean, not to say Hootie and the Blowfish are ordinary moments; they write great songs. But
Yeah.
I remember Adam took offense at being compared to Hootie because he kind of aimed in a more literary songwriting. He looked at his lyrics as very important, and that reflects into the band and the way they play with each other is how important that it is to Adam. And it's true. I, you know,
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
have to. Boy, there's one video, Chris. You'll have to tell me later, and if I can find it again, I'll send it to Matt because I think it's special. But there's one because it was kind of an off the record recording, but there was somebody that recorded the band just kind of like not jamming out's the wrong thing. It was almost like an acoustic practice. It was like before a concert. Oh, and it was a cover of something. Oh, I just have to. Anyway, I'll find
oh,
it. But it just struck me as a nice moment, and I thought you were there, Matt.
Yeah.
Just
ah,
because this is more of a trivia thing. A lot of, and you mentioned it on one, and I think Jeff told us too because I didn't know for sure that you did. One little trivia about you is that you did play on, I think it was at least, or maybe not at least, but two songs after you officially left the band, under quotes, that you played on Sundays, right? Which was on
mhm,
their fifth studio album. And I
yeah,
think you also played on Baby I'm a Big Star Now, which
yes,
is a big, big favorite of Crows fans. I mean, they
good,
just absolutely love that song.
yeah, good, yes,
So I don't know
yeah.
if you have anything to say about those.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. Like after leaving the band, I got to be on a couple of more songs. That's exciting. They
Yeah,
actually pulled
no,
my bass. I think I recorded those parts in the band during my years in the band. So they just flew the bass from a hard drive somewhere and put it on a modern session. So they kept me, and it was nice of them to do that. You know.
Hmm.
okay. I
Um,
mean, I know we got hit at the hour mark, so we're going to wrap things up. I don't know why. For some reason, too, I always wanted to. It's always. I know it's such a little moment, but when you, it's not complicated either. But when you play that little part in Mrs. Potter's, which is also a classic song, I think. But you have that little
Mhm.
bass part in the video. I don't know if you remember. You show up. You kind of face the camera. You play a little bass and then walk away or something like
Oh
that.
yes, yes, I remember that. Is it the official video, right, where we're all in a
Yes.
room?
mm,
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
yes, that was a great bass, by the way. That's a Black Fender jazz bass that belonged to AC/DC's bass player, and I sold that thing, and I'm still kicking myself, for selling it.
I,
well, to wrap towards the end, I can mention a trivia fact. I think I was at your last show with the band, Matt. I think it because you left at the end of 2004, and the Hammerstein Ballroom, I think, was the last show of
Yes,
2004.
that was my last
Um,
show. Yep.
Any memories of that? Was it a good? Because it was only my second show, so I thought it was amazing, but I also had no real context.
Uh-huh. No, honestly, that to me was a dark time for me because I was leaving a great career and turning my back on it. And I chose family because I knew that was the thing to do. The band knew I was not into them anymore. They knew for months that I was suffering out there. And that last show, it represents a dark time to me. You know, uh, uh, but but the beginning of family life and another life, so that I should say that moment was dark, but it was the change that made it feel dark. Everyone's afraid of a big change, and so not to say that that was a bad experience, but it was a scary time to me, and
Right.
it worked out fine. I'm here to
Yeah.
say everything's okay.
Yeah.
you know
And
And it
well,
was a
sometimes
really good show. Still, it was
Uh-huh.
still really.
Yes, good. Yes, good.
Apes, you want to go back? It's like it turns out.
Yeah, right.
well, and sometimes it does take right those negative because if you had other things going, you would have kept going, and then you maybe would have neglected the family at least
Yeah.
to the standards that you wanted to give.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a negative impetus to make a
Yes.
change. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well,
Exactly.
I have
Yeah.
my funny trivia, Matt, because this is just like I make connections. So I've never said that but this is my at least piece of trivia and it is, I think, funny, given right, what anyway your personality, but that I think you can be shown with two instances of giving the middle finger to Counting Crows fans, right? One of them would be, if I remember right, you did, which I don't even think Chris knew, the recovering the satellite insert, right? Isn't that a self portrait of you
Yes.
under the CD? Where if
Yes.
you lift up the CD, you're given the finger, right?
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, I did that. I was kind of frustrated at the guys for some reason, and I just kind of drew that as a middle finger to the band.
Yeah.
We were fighting about something, and Adam liked it so much that he hung it on the fireplace of the thing, of the house. So it hung there during the whole making of Satellites, and he put it on the record. I still have that. So if anyone like
Oh, that's
becomes
great.
yes, yes, I'll, take a picture of that for you guys if you want to see it.
Yeah.
But it's a
Yeah, we'll have to send that out.
yes,
And but
yes,
the other
They
thing,
say
which
a line I've always loved is "There's no peace without the middle finger."
yeah, that's
but
good. Right.
but but
Love
I
it.
made but the other thing, Matt, is that you also show the middle finger in the kind of no official, but it wasn't widely released. The All My Friends music video.
Yes. Yeah, I'm on the roller skates, I believe.
Rollerblade. Yeah, there's a big thing. There's a
Yes.
quick note of you on the roller skates, and they're recording you because they're showing family and kind of off the tour things. And then you
Yes.
quickly give the camera the finger, and I laugh, and I was like, oh, there's
Yes.
Matt Malley giving the
Y-
finger again. So
Yes, there's a more subtle one on that same video. If you'll see, I'm playing bass, and he has me on camera. I just made it a thing to just flip that guy off, and we were laughing
yeah,
about it. And he
yeah.
has me on camera lifting my middle finger while playing bass on stage at the camera. This it's very
Oh,
hard to
okay.
see,
I'll
but he
take
does.
it.
So,
I'm gonna look for that over the
yeah,
next couple of weeks. So,
yeah.
well. Thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time. So, I mean, this was just such a pleasure, and so thank you for all your contributions to the band, and of course coming to talk to us here on Sullivan Street. As I said, I think all four of those albums that you worked on are all incredible. And then, of course, all your live shows and 15 years was a long time. So thank you for your musicianship and service. And
Awesome,
yeah,
Eric. Thank you. Thank you both, Chris, Eric. It's great to talk with you.
yeah. Well, cool. Well, hope to keep in touch and, hopefully have you back on the pod at some time in the future. And yeah, and we'll link to your YouTube account on where we post the episode recap. So,
Awesome. Yeah, great. That's cool.
hey,
All
thank you
right.
so much. So
All
have
right,
a
you guys.
great rest of the weekend. Happy holidays.
Yes.
I'll stop the recording here, and then if you want to give us another goodbye, we can. So for the listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed our discussion with Matt, and if we have him again, maybe we'll allow you to submit some Q&A, and we'll see you next time on Sullivan Street. Thank you so much.